Assalamu alaikum viewers, this is Anwar Kashif Mumtaz with program Tax or Aap, and our today's topic is GST from Pakistan perspective. We have a special program. Let me take you the topic that in Pakistan since 1990 we have a formal sale tax on goods. Since 2005 we have federal excise duty. Since 2000 we have a sales tax on services, and after 18th amendment all the provinces have sale tax on services in VAT mode. Although governments try to implement GST, but till today we are still struggling. The concept and the procedure of the GST is that one person of a supply chain, when he add the value in the goods or services, take the input of the purchases or services he buy for the providing that services or supply of goods, take the credit at the time of computing his output liability. Today we are fortunate to have with us Mr. Wilbert Nieuwen from Amsterdam, and he is a tax advisor, a lecturer at University of Amsterdam, and he is very acknowledged for his articles in EU on VAT. And we have Mr. Mushtaq Kazmi, a senior consultant, Sindh Revenue Board, and who is authority on indirect taxes in Pakistan. So we'll start our show with Wilbert. Thank you very much for visiting Pakistan second time.
Second time in Pakistan.
That's very good. I hope that now you have a better understanding of tax system of Pakistan.
I'm getting familiar with it now.
Yeah. So we are struggling with implementing of general sale tax in Pakistan. So what you have a very comprehensive VAT module. So what do you think we need to take steps for proper implementation of GST in Pakistan? What is your view on that?
Well, you have to do it step by step, and I think that what you did here in Sindh is you very well overthought that it should be taken into steps to introduce a sales tax system, a kind of a VAT, because it also has some elements of VAT in it with the input deduction right. So you did it step by step by only taxing parts of the sectors working of the economy that could take it. And after the society has been used to the sales tax system, you could introduce it furthermore and furthermore till it's getting a real general sales tax. So a very good step to be taken in just partial steps introducing it.
Okay, so in Pakistan we have sale tax on goods at the federal level and service tax at the provincial level. So do you think this is it an internationally acceptable model, or it is viable for the Pakistani tax system?
Quite unique, because all the other states have a combined situation of sales tax, no distinction between the goods and the services. On the other side, I think it is a very wise decision that first of all there was a sales tax on goods, and that now the provinces are able to levy a sales tax on services. It's a very good decision.
It's a good decision.
A very good decision.
Okay,
yeah.
But usually in EU they have the entire unified system. What you have that?
We have a unified system.
Okay.
But nevertheless, if you have to introduce it into a country, it will be very difficult to introduce a VAT system at once. So therefore, step by step, again, that was a very wise decision, I think.
Kazmi Sahab, let me ask you that I think Sindh Revenue Board is a case study for a tax authority, because you people have worked a lot. But what are your challenges nowadays?
Thank you. The challenges these days that we are facing are, number one, that we have a very restricted list of the services which are taxable under the VAT.
Still you feel it?
Yeah, and therefore there is a need that we adopt the negative list system of tariffs, so that the scope is broadened and there is no tax gap and no tax aberration is there. The distortions need to be removed, number one. Number two, the problem is that now that we have the digital services coming in, the e-commerce services and the online platform services, so we have to update our laws and procedures in a manner that the VAT or the sales tax under the VAT concept that we are practicing in Pakistan are implemented in a manner that it is acceptable to everyone, including the person who is providing the intermediary services or the platform services. So these are the two important issues that we are facing, besides the one that the disputes arising or sometimes between the Federation, the FBR and the Sindh Revenue Board in interpretation of each other's laws, so that there is no overlapping or no double taxation as such, which that must be there.
Qasim Sahab, you have a unique experience because you worked at Federation on goods and then you are here in Sindh. So at the Federation level there is a 17% GST on goods, and now it's 13 to 16% by different provinces on the services. So do you think this is cumbersome for the taxpayers and need to be rationalized?
Thank you for this question. In fact, when I worked in the Federal Board of Revenue as member sales tax, at that time there was no provincial sales tax on the services. Now that I'm in the Sindh Revenue Board, and the Sindh Revenue Board, as you know, that is the pioneer institution which was the first one to have made its own law regarding the VAT sales tax on services. And now here, in this case, when we adopted the thing, there was one rate everywhere that was 16% on services. 17% is on goods in the Federation. But on services, under the Federal Excise Act or under the ICT tax on services ordinance, both are 16%. The same is the rate in Punjab, and it was so in Sindh also previously. But we thought that since we are in the initial phases, the rate of tax must be reduced. And therefore, there was a conscious effort to gradually reduce the rate of tax, and in 1 year we brought it from 16 to 15, and from then again the next year 15 to 14, and again the very next year from 14 to 13. And we wanted, in fact, that we should go further down so that it is acceptable by the trade, by the industry, by the taxpayer and by the consumers, all of them. As you know that we have
but taxpayer feels a relief after
they feel relieved. And we were under the impression probably the other administrations will also follow the suit. But unfortunately, or for reasons better known to them, they are continuing with whatever rate they had, and there is no reduction in that rate. Rather on the contrary, sometimes.
So you feel it need to be rationalized?
I think it needs to be rationalized and it needs to be reduced further.
Okay. So it needs to be sit together and then work out some policy on that.
Yeah, because we are in the initial phases, and in this initial phase, we have, this is a new levy or new concept of levy, and therefore it needs to be reduced further. That's my opinion.
Right. Well, but in Pakistan we have some reduced rate of tax, and it is not adjustable. So what is the procedure in EU about these type of, do you have these reduced rate of tax, or you have across the board a single rate of tax or a similar rate of tax?
Besides the taxation of the standard rate and the reduced rate, you have an exemption. And if you fall under an exemption, you are not entitled to a deduction right as well. So you could compare more or less the reduced rate here in Pakistan with the exemptions we have in VAT in Europe. So it's comparable more or less.
But in Pakistan people feel that it is our cost.
Of course, but if you look at the taxable persons that provide exempt services, they feel there's a cost as well. Well, yeah, that's the consequence of a VAT, of a sales tax.
So it's fair. Do you think that
these are decisions to be taken, and it explains why there is a reduced rate in that situation.
Okay.
Let me interject
Please.
here for just for a moment. As Wilbert has very aptly described it, we have one is called the standard rate, statutory rate, which is given in the statute itself. Even in Sindh, if you see, or in any other enactment, that there are two statutory rates in all the statutes. Number one is 19.5% for telecommunications and 13% for all others other than that. So we can't call that reduced rate. We will say that these are the standard rates under the statute. By using the terminology reduced rate, what we mean, where the input tax rate, that this is a concessionary rate, either at the demand of the industry or in view of the peculiar situation of the industry.
Or you're giving the incentive to the industry.
And therefore there is an incentive that, okay, we are reducing it considering what could have been an average input tax credit that the industry could have taken. So there is a reduced rate. So if that consideration is there, then allowing the input tax credit over and above that will amount to double adjustment and double input tax credit.
Okay, thank you. In EU you deal with the cross-border adjustment of VAT. If I'm just putting an example, if a person is traveling from Germany to France, and a person who is supplying the food at the train is from Austria, and the person who is taking the food is making the payment from the bank, a card of a bank in Holland. So what mechanism you have in inter-country adjustments from in EU?
Look at the supply of services. We have two main rules, and we divide it in B2B and B2C services.
Okay.
But besides those B2B and B2C main rules, we have some exceptions to those rules. And especially if you're talking about traveling persons, that is a very complicated situation where the member states decided to keep it like it was before 2010. We had an important change in this law which introduced then the B2B and B2C, and they decided not to change these rules considering the travelers. That had as consequence that it's a quite difficult situation now, because if you're traveling through Europe, the place of supply of those services will take place in all the member states. So that means a multiple registration for the supplier who's making those services.
Because we are heading toward this type of problem, because we have state taxes from Sindh to Punjab, and we are heading towards this. So we need, from your experience, how to deal with that.
Well, as you heard, we didn't deal with it very well in Europe. It's still, in my opinion, a problem.
It's still a problem.
It's still a problem. Yeah, it's not really the most beautiful situation we made. Yeah.
Okay.
So sometimes we make mistakes.
Okay.
And please learn from our mistakes.
Okay. Kajmal, there's business enterprises who work pan-Pakistan. Now they have to file 5 sales tax returns. So do you think there's a need to consolidate that?
I'll say yes, number one. There is a need, and there is a conscious effort on the part of the federal government as well as the provincial governments that this should be done as soon as possible. When Mr. Hamad Azhar was the Minister of State for Revenue, in fact, he constituted a committee and he worked hard to achieve this objective. And that is still going on with now that Mr. Hamad Azhar is not in charge of the Revenue Ministry, rather than he has gone to the Economic Affairs, but the work is being carried on, is still there. Even in Sindh and in the provinces.
So what is the proposal?
The proposal is the 3. It has to be understood that there are 3 proposals simultaneously, which aim at, number 1, providing ease of doing business. Number 2, that providing is unified system of registration, application, and compliance. And the 3 things, number 1 is that single portal, that there should be one single portal on which all the compliances should be made. And that portal should be freely, on real-time basis, available to all the tax administrations. The second thing is single registration.
Okay.
Now, single portal is the easiest of the three. The single registration in EU, they have answered it with differently, like one-stop shop or mini one-stop shop, which Wilbert will be more qualified to explain to you. But in single registration, the proposal is that there should be one single registration instead of having so many registrations, one person. There should be one single registration.
Okay.
What I'll say here that in fact the single registration is being implemented because the one NTN is taken as the NTN is taken as the registration and with some prefixes, except for the STRN concept, which has been very widely publicized by
Absolutely.
the FBR, and that's creating some issues. The third is very important. Lastly, that you said that filing of returns in the various compliance with 5 is the single return.
Okay.
Single tax return, which I should say. That is the most important thing. Now, when you talk of single return, you have to understand that are you dealing with the persons whom we generally call the stand-alone service provider or stand-alone goods suppliers? Are you dealing with the persons who are having the cross-country businesses on all Pakistan basis or on more than one provinces? And which one can be adopted first? But all these considerations are there, and the meetings have, it has not been concluded but going on.
So it is in pipeline?
Yeah, it's in the pipeline.
Okay.
And this will come through. This will come through.
Okay. Thank you. Gentlemen, we need to take a break. So after break, I'll come back to you and ask you the similar question. Viewers, we have to take a break. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back, viewers. We were talking about the multiple compliances, and Kazmi Saab was replying and informing us that there's a proposal in cards and it is in pipeline to have a unified compliance system. Let me ask with Wilbert that you know that multiple compliance is always a cumbersome. So how EU deals with that type of issues?
Well, we have the problem then of the different member states, 28 in total.
Yeah.
As I already explained, in the situation of traveling through Europe, that causes some problems, for instance. And so we said, okay, if you have a multiple registration need and also a multiple compliance problem, we are going to try to solve that by means of one single registration and one single compliance. So we introduced a one-stop shop and a mini one-stop shop. And the one-stop shop is especially meant for non-EU suppliers who are also dealing on the European market and should be registered as VAT taxable persons. And the mini one-stop shop for those companies that are already registered or situated in the European Union, so they already have a VAT registration and already VAT filing obligation. So they are asked to do a one-stop shop, a mini one-stop shop, do a registration and a VAT filing for all the countries. So it's combined VAT return.
Okay.
They
So
apply.
it's, you're already doing that.
We are only doing that.
And do you think you are successful in that, or
It's said that it is successful.
it is successful?
It's successful. And we, just like you introduced the sales tax part by part, we are going to introduce the mini one-stop shop part by part. It depends on what services or what goods are supplied. And we are then introducing it slowly through the European Union.
Okay. In EU VAT laws, distribution is a service or a sale of good?
What is distribution? If distribution is only doing something for somebody else's goods, it is a service. So it depends whether or not, and we call it,
Because in Pakistan we are facing this issue nowadays.
It's the problem about disclosed agents and closed agents. But what's the essential element in this? That if you buy goods in your own name, so it will really, the legal title of the goods will be transferred to the middleman, yeah, necessary for being the distribution, then it is a supply of goods. But however, if it is not in name and it will not be the legal title of the middleman, he is supplying because he receives a commission for his services, then he is making services.
In Pakistan, there's an entire change in this business, because now they are saying it sale margin. Sale margin means it's the supplier for good.
It doesn't matter whether or not you name it like that, okay? It's the legal title that is essential. Is the legal title transferred, then you're receiving really goods in your name and supplying it onwards. Even if you're doing it for somebody else.
So
however, if the legal title has not been transferred to you, you cannot make a supply of goods.
So we need to see the transaction, the format of the business.
Exactly.
Okay. Kazmi Saab, what is your opinion that now it is a GST on services and we have FED in the field? So what the federal government has to do with the federal excise duty now?
Well, the federal, as everyone knows here, that previously known as central excise duty in the Indo-Pak subcontinent, the history of federal excise or central excise is older than that of the sales tax. Unlike India, in Pakistan, there is no universal excise system. In India, everything under the sun was liable to central excise duty, but here the list is restricted. As regards the services, as you are maybe aware, that there was a constitutional amendment, and the federal excise on services was also introduced in 1969 under the martial law regime. And then it got expanded and expanded, and at one time it was expanded like anything until and unless the provincial sales tax on services is crept in. And ideally, when we say why sales tax or why federal excise duty, then we must look into the concept of taxation. The excise duty is generally imposed to tax the consumption of something which is either injurious to the public health or causes some expenditure, public expenditure on the provision of the health services by the government. So that is to curtail that, like on tobacco,
Yes.
on petroleum products. Generally the world over the excises are there. But on other things the excise should not be there. And this was also decided, at least in relation to the services. When in 2010, when it was decided under the 7th NFC award that sales tax on services would be implemented, that
And devolved to the provinces.
that there should be no excise duty on the services except for those things which are under the entry 53 of the Constitution. That's travel by air or travel by anything. So it should be devolved to the That has been implemented in some manner by the Federal Board of Revenue by putting a note in the Federal Excise Act that if anything is liable to sales tax on services in any province and the province is collecting that, then the federal excise duty will not be levied. So that provides the leverage to the FBR to collect it in ICT and the non-provincial areas. But still it's not complete, not on everything. Not on everything. That should be done. And as regards the federal...
Do you think government should need to clarify that, because there is an ambiguous situation in that?
There is a clear-cut note in the law itself. And
now they have put in last year.
No, not last year. It is since last 3 or 4 years. Last year there was a dispute going on, but the National Assembly of Pakistan and they have amended the Federal Excise Act 2005, and they have put a note under last note, footnote, not footnote, rather a note in the first schedule of the Federal Excise Act that if any service is liable to provincial sales tax, and they have listed few items, most of the items, But still, as I said, some of the services find place there.
Okay.
As regards goods, the list is already restricted, and I think that it should be further restricted.
Okay, very well done. Wilbert, in Pakistan nowadays we are facing a new challenge to impose a sale tax on a small traders. So how in EU you are dealing with that issue, and what is your take on it?
For a small traders regime, and that means that there is a threshold. If your turnover is below a certain threshold, and it depends per member state, because all member states may decide how high the threshold will be, then you don't have to pay taxation at all, no VAT at all, but you don't have a deduction right either.
Okay.
So that could be, of course, a problem.
So you have a threshold, I
We
believe.
have a threshold, so if you are below the threshold on turnover, you don't have to pay VAT, but you don't have input rights
Okay.
tax
Definitely.
deduction as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely, but please know that these small undertakers, small companies, also supply to big companies.
Yes.
And the big companies are able to deduct the VAT if it's charged to them. So the bigger companies would like to have invoices with VAT on it. So that demands from the small companies to just opt for taxation then as well. So there is also an option in it. So if you're below the threshold,
And you want
can
to opt?
for taxation. And a lot of taxable person companies opt for taxation then.
But in Pakistan now, federal government is asking the small traders that you have, if you have a certain threshold, more sale, you have to take a CNIC or national, social security card. So is there any condition like this in EU?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
You could also have a look at other countries, and there are some countries that if you are a small company and you don't have to pay the VAT, they still would like to have some revenues from the small companies. And they introduce a turnover tax for much easier taxation than
Fixed
more
turnover tax.
reduced with a fixed tax.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So,
So you could take it instead of, so that you have an option to tax under the VAT, and if you are staying below and you do not opt for taxation, that you decide to take the turnover taxation.
being a tax advisor, what is your opinion that asking for the CNIC is a viable request from the government?
What do you mean exactly?
Because they are saying that the small traders need to ask their customers to give them the CNIC or social card. Don't implement that in EU.
We didn't implement it in the EU, so it's difficult to answer that question.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, no issue. So we need to take a break, and after the break I'll come back to the viewers. We have to take a break. We will talk more about what we need to do in Pakistan and with the experiences of European Union, because they have implemented VAT across 28 countries, and we are struggling with the 5 jurisdictions in Pakistan. I'll come back to it. Welcome back. Mushtaq Sahab, we were talking about the CNIC. What is your take on it? Having a huge experience in Pakistan on indirect taxes.
Well, this concept, once I visited India in 1987, and there was a requirement there that although the CNIC thing was not existing in India at that time, that you bring your ration card whenever you are buying any tangible goods, or you are buying an air ticket, then one has to produce. And if you are a foreigner, then if you don't have, then you pay in the foreign exchange. But that system has also been done away with in India.
By the time.
Yeah, by the time. So it's, I think, and some initiative which looks to me as very primitive.
Okay.
And I think it will create more of problems for the traders, street fights or some disputes like that. So it shouldn't be there. We should be enforcing it in a manner that there is less of disputes between the taxpayers and the consumers.
And we have alternative credit card and debit card, so we can use that
We can,
as for documentation.
we can use that.
Qasim Sahab, with your experience, you can see in Pakistan the authorities have a tendency to encourage the other jurisdiction. So what, with your experience, what the Pakistani tax authorities, provincial and the federal, need to do that?
We have to respect our constitution, number one.
Right.
And we have also to respect each other's laws, number two. And if we find that there is any problem, then the solution is also provided in the Constitution. Okay. That between either we go to the CCI or the IPCC, or amongst ourselves we consider and we resolve that in a manner that it doesn't cause any problem to the general body of taxpayers and the customers or the consumers, and we don't make a fun of ourselves amongst the public. So that should be resolved, number one. But the problems look to me as quite artificial, and because the Constitution has provided the limits, Article 141 of the Constitution, 142 of the Constitution, very, very clear, and then the entries listed in the fourth schedule, that what is to be done by federation, what is to be done by the provinces. As amongst the provinces themselves, except for one thing, that whether it should be on origination basis or termination basis, I do not see any dispute.
Okay.
I do not see any dispute at the moment. And for that we are having continuously, we are meeting each other, the provinces are meeting each other to resolve it, because as you know, the Federal Sales Tax Act and the Federal Excise Act, whether on goods or on services or on both, is still on origination basis. In Sindh, we have the law on the basis of origination, except for the import of services which are coming in, and that is on destination basis. In the other three provinces, we have all the respect for that. But fortunately, in the section of the Act that they have provided, they have also given a subsection 7. Which says that if there is any dispute,
that can be,
that should be resolved in the manner provided in the agreement between the provinces and the federation. So we have to look into that. What's that? And if we really look into that, the problem can be resolved. And I am very thankful to the Ministry of IPCC in Islamabad that this issue raised by the Lahore High Court in one of the cases was referred to the IPCC to resolve it. It was discussed in detail, and they are submitting their report to the High Court, and it should be resolved.
So again, it is in process.
It is in process.
Okay, but you're a firm that there's no dispute if you obey the Constitution.
If we obey the Constitution, if we obey the agreements, and if we think that we are here to facilitate the people, because whoever is collecting the tax is coming in the national kitty. It is the tax GDP ratio which will matter.
Okay. Okay. Well, but in EU, the restaurants are treated taxed as a VAT. What is the reason and what is the basis of it? Because in Pakistan we have that confusion is still going on. So I need your experience on that.
Restaurant meals are considered as being services because the service element is much more bigger than food itself, according to the European Court of Justice. So the European Court of Justice said it a long time ago, for about 20 years ago, this element, because it's composite supply, both are present, goods and services, but the services element is much more important. Well, but please note, although that the restaurant services are taxed with VAT, the VAT is, by the way, is never deductible by the recipient. So if you have a business lunch, for instance, the VAT is not deductible for the company. So that's an important part, but because the private element is also present.
So just for the knowledge of our viewers, because we are very mature in general sale tax, so when you're saying the service and the goods, when we see any transaction, what element we have to consider that it is a service or it is a supply of good? What percentage or what gauge you have that?
Yeah, well, the European Court of Justice just decided it, and based on the facts, so we don't have percentage for that, but they looked at the service provided, like a waiter, like the cook, like the washing machine, and so on. Those are all services related, and of course the food in itself is also an element, but the major part that
It's
you go to the restaurant is that you are served, because otherwise you would go to the supermarket.
The major segment, if service, then it is fall in the service.
If the service is the important element that makes you go to the service provider, it becomes a service, and that's the reason, because if you go to the supermarket you buy the goods, but if you go to the restaurant you would like to be served.
Is there any provision of withholding tax in VAT in EU?
Well, another concept. Instead of a withholding tax, we have a reverse charge mechanism. And that means that not the supplier will charge VAT and the VAT will be paid separately, but the supplier is not enabled anymore, not longer able to charge VAT. He has to, well, he's making a kind of an exempt supply then. So he's not charging VAT then, but the VAT will be self-assessed by the recipient.
So that means there is no concept of withholding of because in
we have concepts not related to the VAT, but together with the VAT there were some problems in the building sector, where there were a lot of contracts.
But in general there is no concept.
We have a withholding tax, but not within the VAT, but in the wage tax. That were combined, supplied, taxable together with the VAT. And we introduced it for that.
Kazmi Sahab, you have every year powers to get to do the audit. So do you think this is viable, or this is or do you think this is a hardship for the taxpayer?
Well, the law provides that not more than one audit in a year.
But once in a year.
It doesn't say that you must conduct once in a year. So let me give you that clarification.
This type of interpretation can be,
because the resources in audit that we have, it is impossible to audit every unit every year. Very limited, and then the signals are provided by our IT system. Why we should audit anyone. The signals are provided, and which one is more grave, because the signals are coming in.
So do you have that mechanism?
Yeah, we have that mechanism. So we have all the reasons. Whenever we issue a notice, we have the reasons why that has been selected for audit. And only on the basis of that, every year, it is the beginning of the year that we select any person for the audit. And there also we have to ensure that he is not very repeated, not highly repetitive.
So what you have in EU, every year audit, or?
We have an unlimited right for the tax authorities to audit. So if they would like to audit 3 times a year, they are able to do so. They don't do so, but they are able. The audit can take for over a period over 5 years. So you can be audited for 5 years in one audit.
But generally they don't do.
They always do that for 5 years if they audit it, and
if they start the audit.
But they are able to do so at any moment they would like to do so, because if there is a fraud case involved, they suspect there is a fraud, they must be able to direct doing an audit.
So we need to wrap up this session, gentlemen. Thank you very much, Mr. Wilbert. Thank you very much, Mr. Kazmi. I hope my viewers will enlighten with your experiences, and the decision maker will take the appropriate from what we have discussed to make a viable decision to make the Pakistan tax system more productive. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Viewers, I'm sure that with the experience of our panel, you must be enlightened with the concept of the GST and know the importance of GST. And I'm sure that the decision maker will take away their suggestion to make appropriate decisions to make the Pakistan tax system more stable. Strong tax system, strong Pakistan.